waters that submerge civilizations, that vanish gods who punish men, who begin again. The myth of the flood doesn't belong to the Bible alone. It crosses continents, languages, and millennia like an invisible wave, sweeping away humanity's memory. From the clay tablets of Mesopotamia to the papal vivu of the Maya, from the legends of India to the stories of Australian Aboriginals, the entire world seems to have drowned at least once in its own sins. But what lies behind this universal story? Was it just a metaphor, a collective trauma, or are all these peoples trying to tell us the same thing in different ways? In this video, we will follow the trail of the flood myth through the ages, reveal what the occult traditions say about this symbolic drowning, and understand why the waters always return to cleanse, punish, or restart the wheel. Mesopotamia, the origin, the flood of Gilgamesh, and Utnapishtim. World before Genesis was written, before Moses walked the sands, even before the concept of a monotheistic God was invented, the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates were already whispering the same story we still hear today, that of a great flood that nearly wiped out humanity. And no, we're not talking about the Bible, we're talking about Gilgamesh and Utnapishtim, the man who cheated death because he listened to the gods. The Epic of Gilgamesh, dated over 4,000 years ago, is the oldest literary record of humankind, a poem carved into clay tablets that already contained everything humanity would come to repeat: the search for immortality, the anguish of forgetting, and the fear of the flood. In this ancient tale, the Mesopotamian gods, capricious, passionate, almost human, decide to exterminate their creation. Why? Because humanity's noise was disturbing their divine sleep. Yes, the Sumerian gods didn't crave spiritual peace, they just wanted silence. But not all gods agreed. Ea, the god of wisdom, the one who always works around the rules, breaks the pact and warns Utnapishtim of what's to come. He doesn't reveal it directly, of course, that would be too much. Instead, he speaks to the walls of Utnapishtim's house, a clear metaphor for spiritual intuition. The true initiate hears what is unspoken. Utnapishtim understands, and he builds a massive boat, a cube, actually the geometric symbol of stability, earth, the sacred, in pure form. Inside he places his family, artisans, seeds, animals, and knowledge, the entirety of humanity distilled into one floating vessel. It's not just a boat. It's a capsule of restart, a symbolic womb. For 6 days and 7 nights, the storm howls. The waters don't fall, they roar. Until finally the ark rests atop Mount Nisir. Utnapishtim's first act upon leaving the boat is to offer a sacrifice, to give thanks, to re-establish the connection with the divine. Because without that bridge, everything sinks again. Now pay attention, he releases a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. The same sequence appears later in the Bible, but these are not just birds. They are symbols of the soul, of hope, of return to the visible world. The raven, the creature that adapts to destruction, finds land. Because the rebuilding of the world never starts with the ideal. It starts with instinct, with shadow. As a reward, Utnapishtim and his wife are made immortal and sent to live at the edge of the world, beyond the rivers where time does not flow. They are not celebrated as heroes. They are isolated as witnesses, because those who've seen the world die never truly belong to the world of the living. And Gilgamesh, the epic's protagonist, hearing this story from Utnapishtim himself, he realizes that immortality does not lie in the body nor in glory. It lies in memory, in legacy, in the name that outlives death. And so he returns home wiser, and finally, human. What does this version of the flood reveal to us? That the flood is not merely divine punishment, it is a test of who deserves to remember. It's not a genetic selection, it's a spiritual one. Those who survive are those who listen, who perceive the signs, who build with time, silence, and reverence their own inner ark. And most importantly, it's not water that destroys, it's forgetting. The flood is, above all, a collapse of consciousness. India and Asia, Manu's boat, and the end of cycles. If the Mesopotamian flood was an unmerciful punishment from the gods for a world too noisy, in India it takes another tone, that of cosmic transition. Time here is not linear but circular. Everything dies to be reborn, and the waters are not enemies but midwives of the new world. At the heart of the Vedic tradition, we find the tale of Manu, the first man, the ancestor of our species according to Hindu texts. One day, while washing his hands in the river, Manu meets a fish, a very peculiar fish. It speaks, and more than that, it knows the future. This fish is no ordinary animal. It is the first incarnation of Vishnu, the sustainer of the universe, manifesting as Matsya, the fish avatar. He warns Manu that a great cataclysm is coming. The waters will rise, swallow the earth, and dissolve everything unanchored in truth. But there is a chance. Build a boat. Bring with you the sages, the world's seeds, the pure animals, and the Vedas, the sacred texts. Knowledge must survive, because it's not about saving flesh, but the soul of the world. When the flood comes, it is not sudden, it is ritualistic. The waters rise as if obeying a divine plan. Manu ties his boat to the horn of Vishnu Matsya, who guides him through the currents to the top of a sacred mountain. When the waters recede, a new cycle begins, a new Manvantara, an age of humanity. For Hindus, the universe is periodically recreated. We are all trapped in a cosmic game of expansion and dissolution, and the flood is just the comma between one act and the next. Unlike the Bible, where the flood is the end, here it is the interval, a deep breath before another divine inhalation. In Hindu symbolism, water represents Maya, illusion. It dissolves forms to reveal essence. And Manu's boat, like Noah's or Utnapishtim's, is more than floating wood. It is the vessel of consciousness, that which sails through the waters of ignorance without drowning. But we don't stop in India. In China, the flood is not avoided, it is confronted. In ancient Chinese tradition, the flood doesn't come as divine punishment, but as a challenge from nature, raw chaos that requires more than faith. It requires subtle wisdom and action. It is not a sentence, but a test, a collective initiation. The myth speaks of a time when rivers overflowed, the heavens revolted, and the earth seemed ready to dissolve in its own disorder. Fields flooded, villages vanished, and people cried out for salvation. But a prophet didn't come, an engineer did. You, the great son of the official gun, was chosen to face the chaos. But he did the unthinkable. He didn't try to stop the water. Instead, he listened to it. He didn't fight nature. He conversed with it. For 13 years, you walked China's plains, observing rivers, mapping valleys, listening to the mountains. He dug canals, redirected waters, sculpted the terrain with almost divine patience. According to legend, he spent so many nights away that when he finally returned, his own son didn't recognize him. This is no hero with a sword, but with a shovel, a symbol of a central virtue in Chinese thought, the Tao, the way. Instead of confronting nature's forces, Yu flows with them. As the Tao Te Ching of Laozi teaches, nothing is softer than water, yet nothing can surpass it in overcoming obstacles. Yu represents the sage who understands chaos cannot be conquered, it must be redirected. The flood in this myth does not destroy the pure nor select the righteous. It simply exposes the unprepared and exalts those who know how to listen to the world. After taming the waters, Yu not only saved his people, he founded a dynasty, became an emperor. Because in Chinese cosmology, ruling well means first understanding the invisible flows of nature and society. Yu didn't ascend the throne by blood, but by spiritual merit. He overcame chaos not with force, but with harmony. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of the Chinese flood. The world doesn't need saving through miracles, but through humble wisdom. In the West, we face catastrophe with faith and sacrifice. In the East, with patience, listening, and the drowned New World floods in the Americas adaptation. While the Old World narrated the flood with gods ruling from the heavens, the indigenous peoples of the Americas didn't see the world as a stage, but as a living organism, and water was the blood that sometimes revolts to heal the infection. In the sacred Mayan book, the Popol Vuh, we find one of the most symbolic and brutal versions of the flood. The first humanity created by the gods was made of clay, fragile, fleeting, incapable of holding the divine breath. The second attempt was with wood, a humanity without soul, without memory, without gratitude. They walked, ate, reproduced, but could not pray. They did not acknowledge their creators. The gods' response? A brutal reset, rain of resin, talking beasts, rivers that drown, and stones that crush. Everything turns against humans. Even their tools attack them. The world unravels in symbolic chaos, where creation rebels against the Creator, not because men were evil, but because they were unconscious. Here the flood is life's revenge against automatism. It is Mother Earth cutting ties with children who became zombies. Among the Incas and their predecessors, we find legends of a great flood that covered the valleys and forced survivors to seek refuge in the highest mountains. In some versions, the creator god Viracocha himself sends the deluge to destroy a previous race of giants and restore balance to the world. When the waters recede, Viracocha walks across the surface of Lake Titicaca and gives rise to a new humanity. The detail here is subtle yet profound. The new world emerges from water, but also from the creative word. Viracocha speaks and things happen. It is the divine voice that turns chaos into cosmos. The flood is not the end. It is the prerequisite for conscious creation. And it's no coincidence that Lake Titicaca, where this new order begins, is the highest navigable lake in the world. Because after the flood, only what is elevated survives, elevated in spirit, in ethics, in wisdom. The mythology of the Hopi indigenous peoples from what is now the southwestern United States takes the symbolism of the flood to another dimension, esoteric initiation. According to their traditions, we are not living in the first world, but in the fourth, and each previous world was destroyed due to spiritual imbalance, including a great flood. Those who preserved their connection with the Great Spirit were warned by the ant people, subterranean beings, possibly symbolic, and guided into refuges within the earth's core. During the cataclysm, they lived underground, learned to listen to the silence of stone, to survive on almost nothing, and to master humility. When the waters receded, they returned to the surface to help rebuild the world, more connected, more purified, more wise. This myth is deeply symbolic. The flood isn't only external, it's a journey into the soul, into the deep unconscious, what Jung would call a descent into the womb of the psyche. The underworld is not hell, it's the cave of transformation, and those who do not dive into it do not return renewed. In American myths, the flood is not a one-time event, nor a final judgment. It is a recurring test, a reminder that spiritual amnesia comes at a cost. The gods do not punish out of cruelty, but out of necessity. When humans disconnect from essence, the world reacts, and it reacts forcefully. Atlantis, the Bible, and beyond, the flood, as esoteric code. Now we return to the old world, but beyond official history. Let us talk about Atlantis. Plato, in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, doesn't describe just another myth, but a report received from Egyptian initiates. Atlantis was said to be an advanced civilization, technologically, spiritually, politically. A place where the sons of Poseidon built orichalcum temples and the priests mastered harmony between heaven and earth. but something broke. The pursuit of wisdom gave way to the thirst for power. Knowledge became disconnected from the sacred. And as if the universe itself corrected the distortion, the island was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. The message is clear. The fall did not come from ignorance, but from arrogance. Atlantis was not punished. It imploded from spiritual hubris. In esotericism, Atlantis represents the peak of what humanity can become, and also the abyss into which it can fall. Many occultists like Helena Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, and Manly P. Hall see Atlantis as a symbolic memory of a prehistoric age, a collective archetype of a world that fell because it forgot the heavens. In Genesis, we have the most well-known version. Noah, a righteous man among men, is chosen by God to preserve creation. He builds an ark, fills it with pairs of animals, and watches the world drown in water for 40 days and 40 nights. But the biblical text is full of codes. The number 40 appears numerous times in Scripture, always linked to periods of purification. 40 years in the desert, 40 days of fasting, 40 days of flood. Symbolically, 40 is the time needed to transmute a soul. The ark, in turn, is more than a cosmic raft. It is a hermetic matrix, an alchemical vessel where the old world dissolves so the new one may be born, a true floating Athanor. And the most curious part, at the end of the flood, God does not establish a punishment, but a covenant. The rainbow appears as a sign that destruction gave way to promise. And the rainbow in esotericism is the full spectrum of spiritual light, a bridge between worlds, between realms, between frequencies. The Bible tells a simple myth, but for those who read with the right eyes, it delivers a coded manual for soul regeneration. In the apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Enoch, the flood takes on an even darker and more mystical tone. Before the rain, there was on earth a race of giants, the Nephilim, born from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. They taught humans the use of metal, sorcery, cosmetics, astrology, and war. These fallen angels corrupted creation, and the flood was a direct response from the heavens, a universal reset to keep knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. But here, too, lies ambiguity. Knowledge itself was not evil. The problem was its misuse. The same knowledge that elevates can also destroy if detached from spiritual ethics. This tension is the heart of esotericism. Light misdirected becomes shadow. The word misspoken becomes a curse. The impure initiate becomes a tyrant. In alchemical treatises, the flood appears as an essential stage. The phase of dissolution, solutio. In it, the raw material, the ego, the old world, ignorance, is submerged in symbolic waters. Nothing can be born without first disintegrating. There is no gold without mud, no spirit without the death of the profane. The true flood is not a historical event. It is a cyclical state of human consciousness. It comes when we've accumulated too much noise, too much ego, too much separation, when the outer world reflects inner chaos. But it's also a chance. Every destruction carries the seed of a higher reconstruction. Every water that swallows also prepares the soil to bloom. And maybe, just maybe, the true flood is the call to remember. The question now is not, when will the next flood come, but rather, have you built your ark yet? Thank you for watching.